Equals. The morning broke with a gray haze over the Thames as London stirred under the weight of war. Thomas Weller, a quiet boat owner from Hampton, stood at the pier, listening to the distant drone of aircraft and the murmur of troubled voices. The government had called for every vessel that could float. His pleasure craft, the Larkspur, had spent her life ferrying holidaymakers under the bridges of Richmond and Kingston. Now she was to face the sea. Tom ran a hand along her varnished rail. He'd never crossed the channel, couldn't read a naval chart, but inside him stirred something fierce, a duty too strong to ignore. Around him, other civilians gathered, fishermen, ferrymen, weekend sailors. Steam curled from kettles, and the air smelled of oil and resolve. "We're going to Dunkirk," someone said softly. Tom nodded once, gripping the wheel as if anchoring himself to courage.
Equals. The Larkspur eased away from the pier with a sputter of her small engine, joining a motley convoy moving downriver toward the channel. Flags fluttered weakly in the wind, and smoke from factories trailed behind like memories of peacetime. Tom's hands trembled on the wheel. His heart thudded with equal parts pride and fear. Beside him, a Royal Navy reservist named Arthur Clifton offered a reassuring grin. "It's not far," Arthur said, though both knew that was a lie. Past Greenwich and into the estuary they went, the river broadening into the sea, the taste of salt sharpening in the air. In the distance, faint booms rolled over the horizon, the sound of France collapsing. Tom stared ahead, eyes wet from the wind, realizing this would no longer be a holiday voyage. The little ship sailed on, bound for history.
Equals. By nightfall, they reached Ramsgate. The harbor was alive with confusion, petrol drums, stretchers, sailors barking orders through megaphones. The scent of brine mixed with diesel and fear. Tom learned quickly to follow signals, trusting Arthur to read the charts. "You'll be fine, lad," said an old fisherman as he passed, tying down nets on a vessel twice as old as its skipper. At last an officer waved them forward. "Proceed at dawn. Dunkirk's the target." The words struck with the weight of the impossible. In the cramped cabin, Tom tried to rest. He traced the route in his mind, the dark waves stretching between safety and fire. Outside, gulls wheeled above the lamplight as engines coughed to life. At first light, the Larkspur and 100 others turned their bows toward France. The channel glinted cold and indifferent beneath the rising sun. Equals. The small flotilla pressed on into the channel's steel-colored expanse. Wind lashed against the hull, and waves smacked with relentless rhythm. Around them, 30 or more boats bobbed in uneasy formation, some pleasure crafts, some fishing trawlers, some little more than skiffs. Tom felt each jolt in his spine, each spray of salt water stinging his eyes. He glanced at Arthur, who studied the compass with a frown. "Keep her steady, lad. We're halfway now." Overhead, clouds thickened like bruises. The radio crackled with interrupted voices, reports of enemy aircraft, of bombed convoys. Tom swallowed hard. "What are we really doing out here?" he whispered. Arthur's reply was simple. Helping them come home. The horizon looked endless, but somewhere beyond it, men waited on the beaches of Dunkirk.
Equals. The French coast rose out of the murk like a broken promise. Smoke coiled into the sky above Dunkirk, black columns twisting toward heaven. The air thrummed with distant gunfire. "God help us," Tom murmured. As they neared the beaches, the sea turned surreal, littered with debris, lifeboats, and oil slicks. Soldiers waved from the shallows, uniforms soaked, faces streaked with grime and desperation. RAF fighters roared overhead, chasing German bombers through the low clouds. One fell flaming into the surf, the concussion rattling the asterisk Larkspur's timbers. Arthur yelled, "Keep steady!" while Tom gripped the wheel with white knuckles. He saw men cheering from the shore, the sight both heartbreaking and galvanizing. He realized with awe and terror alike that their little vessel now stood within the war itself.
Equals machine gun fire rattled from the dunes as the Larkspur pushed into shallower water. Soldiers waded through waist-deep surf, their rifles held above their heads. "Take as many as you can," Arthur shouted. Tom dropped anchor, lowering a ladder as shells burst among the waves. A young corporal clambered aboard, gasping thanks, followed by others, their boots leaving muddy prints across the deck. Overhead, dive bombers screamed, releasing ordnance that churned the sea into froth. Tom's heart thundered. Splinters peppered his arms as a shock wave rocked the boat. "Hold on!" he yelled, the words lost in thunder. The Larkspur filled fast with weary men, some wounded, some silent. For the first time, Tom truly understood the courage that men's fear into purpose.
The little vessel turned seaward, burdened with 20 exhausted soldiers. Smoke thickened astern, the coast receding in flame and ruin. The men on board sat in stunned silence, listening to the drone of aircraft fading behind them. Tom felt the hull creak with each wave. "Will we make it?" one soldier asked quietly. Arthur smiled faintly. "We didn't come here to fail, son." The engines coughed and steadied. Every foot of distance toward England felt like defiance itself. Through binoculars, Tom saw other boats making the same desperate run. Laundry skiffs, tugs, steamers, all defying the odds. The sea, so endless before, now seemed like a bridge home. By dusk, the cliffs of Dover glowed faintly. Relief washed through him, mingled with disbelief. They had done the impossible, and yet the war was far from over.
Ramsgate reappeared under a dim sky of ash and sunset. Naval officers rushed to meet the incoming boats, guiding survivors to makeshift triage stations on the pier. As stretcher-bearers worked among them, the air filled with murmured gratitude and disbelief. Tom helped a wounded private down the gangplank. The young man clasped his arm, whispering, "Thank you, sir." Tom's throat tightened. Around him, men wept openly as more little ships arrived, each carrying its cargo of lives pulled back from the brink. "How many trips will they make?" Arthur asked. "As many as it takes," Tom replied. The harbor lights flickered on, painting the river in gold and sorrow. The Larkspur rested at last, steaming gently, her deck scarred but proud.
Days later, the Larkspur lay once more on the Thames, tied to the same pier she had left from. Tom sat on the deck with a cup of cold tea, the city quiet save for the hum of trains and the toll of church bells. He ran his hand over the patched hull, over each scar as if reading a story etched by the sea. News of Dunkirk's miracle spread like light after storm. Hundreds of thousands had escaped, but Tom knew too well the cost behind that triumph. He thought of the young faces, the dead water, the thin line between courage and luck. "You did well, old girl," he murmured to his boat. The Thames flowed steadily beneath, indifferent yet eternal. The same river, changed forever by war.
Years later, when London had survived the Blitz and the tide of war turned, people still spoke of the little ships of Dunkirk. They became symbols of unity, defiance, and the spirit that refused surrender. Tom Weller's name was rarely mentioned, but sometimes he saw children on the pier staring at the asterisk Larkspur as though she were a relic of myth. He would smile quietly, polishing her brass, knowing what she had seen. "Ordinary men did extraordinary things," he would tell them. On calm mornings, with sunlight rippling across the Thames, he could almost hear the hum of engines over the channel again, the sound of courage carried on the tide.